Hello, I'm Sam Smith, and you're listening to I Know That Voice.
Hello and welcome back to I Know That Voice. It's the podcast with voices you know, telling you stories you definitely don't. Episode 1 and 2 brought us two of the major voices of football, rugby and cricket, and today we're diving into the world of tennis to speak to one of its finest narrators. As a player, she was her country's leading light, spending 4 years as the British number one, and is now one of the sport's biggest hitters in the commentary box. She's revered by fans all over the world and is an exceptional mentor to younger broadcasters, but does have to endure a tedious conversation whenever she books a table at a restaurant over the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome tennis's one and only Sam Smith. Hello, Sam.
Yes, I do have to say I'm not the singer, as there's a pause at the other end of the phone with great excitement.
How are you doing this week and what are you up to?
Well, I'm here at Stockley Park. I'm working for Amazon, and we are covering the Miami Open. We have a team, an Envision team on site. This is a fairly normal way of doing things now. And then we have a group of us commentators back here calling all the matches. Obviously, Miami's 5 hours behind, or it was 4 hours because we had the time change at the weekend, which always throws me completely. And that's sort of how we do it. So it's quite long. It's 12 straight days. So I'm on day 7 now. Not that I'm counting. And so, we're going all right, but it's pretty busy, all the way through flick-flacking from men's and women's, and sometimes we bring it on air like we're doing it today, before the on-site team take over. So yeah, it's fairly lively. Thank you for having me on your show.
No worries at all. Absolutely. So we're going to go into the ins and outs of commentary and all there is to speak about. But first and foremost, to kick off, what do you most enjoy about what you're doing at the moment?
This particular week, or
just commentary in general, just as a sort of way of life.
What do I like about it? Because when I started, I obviously played the game to a reasonable level, but wasn't a big name. But it was enough to open the door, and because of that, when you're a famous ex-footballer or famous tennis player, you automatically get snapped up by the networks. And you tend to work for one network. And you get all the high-profile matches, and that's what you do. And you don't probably get a lot of feedback because you're so famous, everyone's scared to say anything to you. But the way I started was doing little bits of radio. I started at Eurosport with Simon Reed, who's a fantastic broadcaster. You should have him on your show. And then doing a little bit of BBC radio, little bits and pieces all over the place. So I really like, and that I've really continued that. So I've never really worked for one network exclusively. So I've enjoyed working with different broadcasters, ITV for the French Open. I did work for Australian channels, and I like that variety. I feel I've learnt a lot more and hopefully become a more layered commentator because of it. So I like that side of it, and I just like, the goal for me was always to be the best broadcaster that I could possibly be. Even though I started off as an expert, I always was sitting there watching excellent broadcasters like Simon Reed, like David Mercer, John Barrett, and Barry Davis, great football commentator, but probably the greatest, most versatile broadcaster we've ever had in the UK, and sitting there learning, and then trying year by year to improve. So those two facets, really, the variety of working for all the different networks and alongside in different teams, and you always learn, you always pick up little things from, and how to work with different producers who want different things, and then working alongside great broadcasters and figuring out how to learn from their technique, because no one teaches you anything. There isn't commentary school you go to. Learning from their technique, but also doing it in the way that I want to do it, but maybe picking up the fundamentals and a structure from them, that what really works and is tried and tested, but maybe for me making it more modern and more me as well.
And as a player, obviously, as a performer, you're training, you're practicing, you're reviewing. How does that help you, that kind of athlete mindset and that athlete pattern, does that help you then coming as a commentator?
It teaches you to apply yourself and also to work when you're tired and keep pushing. And you'll notice, I think that's where we do really well. a lot of the ex-players, because some of these hours are not for the faint-hearted. Often, I am working through the night, finishing at 5 or 6 in the morning. When I'm working from a studio in the UK on tournaments that are coming in from Asia or America, as I am now, or even at the Australian Open, the Andy Murray, the Nasi Kokonakis match with Darren Cahill, till 4 or 5 in the morning, and we just looked at each other and we just rolled up our sleeves and kind of enjoyed it and got on with it. And that's very much a tennis player mentality. I work a lot with Annabelle Croft, another very good ex-player. Been in the TV world for a very long time, and we've done some long, hard nights, in the commentary box, and a cup of tea will keep us going. But we do look at each other and sort of roll our eyes and think, and just go, right, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to get on with it. So that really helps you, because you can't really wimp out. In a tennis tournament, you have to travel, you have to play when you're tired, you're injured. So you're used to pushing through. Whether that's good for you or not, I don't know, but we do it anyway. The odd thing is that when you are a professional athlete, you're used to coaching and feedback and someone telling you, no, that's good, that's terrible. And when you come into broadcasting, what I found very difficult to start with was that there was no one coaching you and there wasn't any feedback. So you had really no idea how things were going. I was very lucky when I first started working at Eurosport, because Simon Reed, I think he's still there 25 years later. He's head of commentary, but you couldn't have a better person, because I was also working alongside with him in the booth, because he's a fantastic tennis commentator. Yeah. And he would turn to me occasionally and say, Sam, a little more of this, a little more of that, or you really don't need to speak then, I don't want you speaking. He really, in a very good way, without crushing my confidence in those early years, just guided me. He's done that with an awful lot of young commentators. But in terms of working for a lot of broadcasters, no one will say anything to you for weeks and weeks, whenever, for years on end. Yeah. And that I found very odd. And I also realised, don't expect any pats on the back. Just get on with it. You'll only probably hear something if you really, really mess up.
Am I right in saying the first commentary you did, you were still playing, but you were on crutches, and you were very injured, and you might have had some medication as well, and you were in quite a weird space. Can you tell me about that day?
Yeah. So I had massive ankles. I had double ankle surgery. I mean, not some of it was keyhole, but I also had the cut you open variety. Late after Wimbledon 1999. I should have had it earlier, but anyway, that's another story. And then about 4 or 5 days later, my agent decided that I shouldn't be sitting around on the sofa doing nothing, and so it booked me in to go to Eurosport, which was then in Drury Lane in London, and I believe they put me in a car up there. I went with my then partner. I must have been up to the eyeballs in anaesthetic and painkillers, on crutches, non-weight bearing, with the biggest cast on my lower leg imaginable, because it would cut you open surgery, and also they always put bigger casts on athletes. I understand now, because we'll always try and do something. So they try and mobilise you. I've had 4 operations now, and every time I know what's coming, they always try and do more to stop you doing things, because
they know what you're like.
The minute. But and this was not in the rehab program. I was supposed to rest. I mean, I was non-weight bearing for 3 months. I was not really supposed to be doing anything. But up I went, and I had my boot, or this huge plaster cast, on a box, because I had to keep my leg up. I didn't really want to have a sort of blood clot in the middle of commentary. And off I went. And I do remember, obviously it was a memorable day, but I remember it very well because I worked with a broadcaster called Chris Bradnam, who'd done a few years of commentary, former player himself. And this was at the time of the proliferation of cable TV. It was almost right at the beginning, year or two in. And it's always stayed with me, the bits I can remember through the blur, because he was so protective, encouraging. He turned my mic on and off. I'd never let anyone do that now, but I know why he did it. And all he did was make sure that I had a really good experience and make sure that I was okay, and kept encouraging me, and didn't really concentrate too much on his own broadcasting. It was all about making sure that I was okay. And I've really taken that on board. I worked with a lot of new broadcasters over the years, and I really kind of put myself to one side and I want that first experience to be really great for them, because I think that can set the tone for maybe a career they hadn't even thought of doing, or maybe they want to get into it. I want it to be as kind of warm and protective as I possibly can do for them.
And now that you've been doing it sort of quite a few years, what do you think you yourself, what does Sam Smith bring to a commentary team? Do you think you have kind of a style? Because I was listening to a Match Today top 10 podcast yesterday. We're talking about the different styles of pundits. So you've got a Micah Richards who's kind of bringing the flavour and the humour, lightens it up. You've got Roy Keane who's kind of just cutting everyone down for the entertainment value. Then you've got your analysts. Is there a kind of similar dynamic in a tennis commentary team? Do you need a balance of characters and stylists, if you like?
Well, in any commentary team, so Micah Richards, Ian Wright, Roy Keane, they're pure experts. They analyse what they're seeing. They can bring a lot of their personality to it, a lot of their opinions. That's how I started off. And when you're fresh off the tour, it's easy because you've played a lot of these players. You know them from the locker room. You have to be prepared to maybe say things that they don't particularly. You have to put yourself on the line, and you have to give an opinion.
Was that difficult in the early days when you were?
I didn't find that difficult at all.
No, Nasser Hussain said the same.
I didn't find it hard at all because I'm a history grad, and I always feel I would never give a sort of spurious, "Oh, that's not very good." I would always back it up with a fact. So I would say, "Well, I don't feel her forehand is as good this week as last week because her take back is late, or it's too high, or something's happened in the rhythm." Or the timing. I would always give a fact behind it that also protects you as well. So if they ever came up to me and said, "Look, you were really critical of my forehand," I would say, "Well, this X, Y, and
facts.
Yeah, it's a fact. I feel safer with the facts." So that is one role. The other role is the lead broadcaster or the presenter. So Gary Lineker is the football presenter, and a lead broadcaster is someone that I call frames and really steers the commentary and tries to bring the best, in my view, the best out of the colour commentator, the expert. It's not really about you or what you think. You're just steering it, guiding it, and what I'm trying to do is not get in their way. One great piece of advice I was given early on was let the colour shine. So my job is to make them hopefully sound as good as they possibly can, draw out anything interesting. If they're a little bit, they're not really, maybe but they're a bit nervous and they're not reading the game, I might, because I've played, if it's tennis, not if it's another sport, but if it's tennis, might steer them in that way. But the sort of answer to your question, I feel, so I do a lot of prep, so hopefully I bring good knowledge, but I feel I'm able to work with anyone and bring out the best in them and draw that out. So I always feel I will fit around all the different characters that I've worked with over the years, and that's what I try and do sort of more than anything else, and just not get in their way and not get in the way of the viewer as well. I want them to really be able to sit back and enjoy it without being on them too much.
So talk us through the detail of your preparation for a tournament, whether that be your fronting the coverage, and how that differs from when you're, say, a pundit at Wimbledon. Talk me through how you approach a tournament as a broadcaster. Because that's what people see you at tennis, but they actually don't really know what goes in behind the scenes. For all they know, you just pitch up and have a chat, but that's not the reality, is it, Sam?
Well, again, it's two different roles, and I would prepare. I don't really I've been doing this, I've been in the media game for about 23 years now, so it feels a long time. It's gone very quickly because it's been so enjoyable. I started off as an expert, and that is a lot drawing on your playing years, your knowledge. It's a lot about, if you're at a tournament, trying to go out and watch as many players as you can, because it's very different seeing it in real time rather than even behind a commentary box screen, let alone a TV screen. You also get to see the dynamic between their coaches. There's also some time. I would always spend some time with the journalists. I had a really good friend who was an Italian journalist, so if an Italian player suddenly did well, I'd want to know a little bit more. I mean, I would do that now in both roles. I've got my sort of journo friends who can help me a little, give me something that nobody else has. So a little time cruising around the journalist, the broadcast room is always very handy. There are certainly experts that come into the booth and they haven't really done a lot of prep or anything, but particularly the ones that have been great players, they don't really need to because they've been there, they've done it, they know exactly what it feels like to play a major final. But then you get some champions that come in, and someone like Jim Courier, he flips open his computer and there's just so much information there highlighted. He's so ready for you. But there's others that don't do as much as that, but they're just super gifted at reading the matches. So either way is fine. And a lot about it, the really best experts, they understand their role. They know they're there to analyse the play and maybe give a few stories from behind the scenes. They're not really there to tell me that, so and so, won so many matches and played this tournament and that. That's kind of my job as a broadcaster. In the broadcast role, it depends what sort of event it is. At the start of the year for the Australian swing, there's just a lot of kind of maybe background reading some autobiographies, just having a really good overview and copying up some notes from the previous season so that I'm really ready for the new year. That's important. Getting used to working for an Australian network. I often go down early and I never really watch TV, but I do there because I'm working as an English person for an Australian network. I need to get a feel of what's been happening in the country.
Yeah.
That's also really important. But normally if I'm doing a couple of matches, I'd always prep for a couple of hours at least. If it's a final, maybe a lot more. I did go through an over-prepping phase, which wasn't terribly helpful. But I often find that it's always useful down the track. And I'm very curious at just following little trails of information.
Narratives.
But I've done some very big finals and I've done a lot of prep. And I've often only used about 2% of it because it's just not right for the match. I thought I'd had all my bases covered, but it went completely differently. So there's a lot of prepping, but I'm super happy to chuck it out the window if it's just not relevant.
Can you think of an example of a big final where you've done that prep and it's just gone now, don't need this?
There's been quite a few that have taken, switched gears and taken a turn. Or there's just a sense of the feeling of it, of the occasion, where what you have and what you've researched just doesn't fit. But then there's times when there's been some very big finals, for example, the Ash Barty Australian Open 2022. I'm an English person. I'm fronting up a Channel 9, which is it's like a ITV in the UK. It's a big network, very conscious of a large audience, and I prepped the hell out of that. And I didn't use a lot of it exactly, but because I had so much, I think it was Des Lynam who said knowledge is power. It's also confidence as well, that I had so much there in my back pocket that when I needed something really special for the match point or the win, it wasn't. I don't ever pre-work out what I'm going to say, ever, either at the top when you come on live to a match, because you never know what pictures you're going to get.
Yeah.
Barry Davis taught me that all the years I worked with him at the French Open, and he's big on watching and pictures, but also at the end I never really have a prescribed line or anything like that, because it can just change in the moment. It can feel very different. But when you've got all that in your back pocket, somehow you sort of get some inspiration from it, and sort of a few things sort of coalesced and came out, and hopefully a few really, really good lines, which are really important for something sort of which is historical, because that will be played, moments from that match will be played for many, many years to come.
Absolutely. Nick Mullins is another one who is all about the pictures. He's always watching the screen. Yep. What's the viewer seeing? Am I telling them what they're seeing? Am I in tune with them, I guess? You mentioned going to Exeter Uni while you were still playing. How long had you been on the tour at the point you went to uni?
I turned pro, or what I call full-time, because I'd played pro events from about the age of 15, literally just before, I think it was about my 18th birthday. And I finished my A-levels, And then I played on the tour for a couple of years. And then I decided that it wasn't for me. And it really wasn't through lack of success. I was 19, 20, and I was 100 in the world. I was playing all the slams, but I didn't enjoy it. I had a lot of things going off the court, which didn't really help. I realise that now. But, that age, I think for both young men and women is very difficult and very volatile. There's a lot going on. It's given me a great deal of empathy when you see players that maybe have had a lot of success at 18 and then are struggling at 19 or 20. And I did go through that second year syndrome. I didn't really realise how hard the second year on tour was going to be. I wasn't prepared for it. And the first year was a breeze. Came straight out of, being pretty good junior, top 15, top 20 junior, to almost, breaking the top 100. That was quite a fast transition. But also, back in those days, if you weren't heading towards the top 50 by 18 or 19, you were considered somewhat of a failure because you had Capriati at 14.
Yeah.
You had so many top players who were breaking 50, 20 at 16.
Sharapova's.
That was obviously later. But now it's very acceptable. I'm doing a lot of players at the moment who break the top 100 at 23, 24. There's a much longer transition. There are obviously a few exceptions where you have Emma Raducanu and Iga Świątek and Bianca Andreescu in recent years. But there was, but that's kind of the last sort of 20 years. It's been a longer transition, not for the women as well. But back in the day, you really had to crack it, straight out of juniors. So it wasn't really for lack of success, but I did not enjoy the tour and all the responsibilities and the life management. I was hopeless at all that. And so I decided I can be like this. I'm just not going to do it anymore.
Was that quite rare for a tennis player at that point?
It possibly was. Interestingly, so through the juniors, there was another player called Sarah Loosemore who became a top 60 player on the tour straight out of juniors.
Yeah.
We tracked along together.
Her son will be listening to this, Sammy. He's a listener to this podcast.
Okay,
so shout out to Sammy.
And she was always slightly better than me in juniors. Super bright, went to Oxford, and she also came to the same conclusion after 2 years that she didn't want to do it. It just wasn't what she wanted, and she went off to Oxford. She didn't come back to play tennis, but completely, we never really even discussed it. Independently, we came to that conclusion that it wasn't what we wanted. And I was living abroad. It was just a messy time. And possibly if I'd have sort of slowed down and thought about it and discussed it a bit more openly, the difficulties I was having, maybe I would have reset and carried on. But I just kind of went, no, I'm not. I think it's also very difficult when a lot of players now don't do regular schooling. So I went pretty much all the way through. I had friends at university who seemed to be having an absolutely brilliant time, and I was just getting more and more miserable. I didn't want to be 20 and miserable.
No.
So but it was interesting that someone as talented and as smart as Sarah also came to the same conclusion. So then I went off. That was good having the A levels in the bag. I mean, maybe if you don't have a backup plan, you keep going. Yeah. So it was maybe a help or a hindrance, but.
What do you think it was, looking back?
Well, I think sometimes when you have a plan B, it means you don't have full faith in plan A.
Okay.
So, but having that option in my back pocket gave me an exit route.
Yeah.
So I knew I didn't have to keep going. Maybe I actually feel if I had kept going, I would have stopped within 2 years. I think I would have stopped completely. Whereas I did my degree and then randomly I decided to come back.
What's your perspective then on Emma Raducanu? Because obviously she, as you said, she shot to Grand Slam glory at a ridiculous age, especially for this kind of modern era. And there's so much pressure that comes with that, so much scrutiny at such a young age, as you were saying. And you must be somebody who analyses her constantly on the airwaves. What is your perspective on her career so far? And if you were an advisor for her, what would you be saying?
Well, her trajectory is possibly the most extraordinary that we've ever had in tennis. I think the only comparison, and I only happen to know this because I bumped into John and Angela Barrett as Angela Mortal won Wimbledon, and she picked up in the 50s that Maureen Connolly won the US Open on her debut at 16 and then carried on winning. That's a different time. But Emma Raducanu is unprecedented, and we're also living in this era of social media as well. So she became from sitting her A-levels, a few months later, she came and became a global superstar in a way, at such a young age, in a way that, I know it certainly hit Chris Evert at a young age, but she'd had some runway up there before, and Tracy Austin as well. They'd had a few years, but for Emma, it was extraordinary. It's really hard to advise. I'm very pleased that she did her A-levels. I don't think she got enough credit for how well she did, because I know the juggle between trying to do A-levels, which I think for a lot of 16, 17-year-olds is hard enough without being an international sports person. On top of it, it's a lot, particularly a tennis player where you're travelling all over the world on the junior tour. So she did all that. It's not surprising that it's taking her time. Her world must have been spinning, and so much came at her. And it's very hard to manage for the success, something that's not, it was so unexpected. They didn't even have time to manage for the success in a way that Iga Świątek, when she won the French Open at 19, there was a carefully choreographed, it was surprising, but there was a plan almost ready to go, and they pulled her straight out of competition. They got her to understand the business side. They went and did a load of physical testing. They tested her. Honestly, it was a military, with military precision. The 3 or 4 months afterwards, they planned exactly what she needed to do. Whereas with Emma, it was a little, even though she has a great management company, I don't like it when her management company has been so criticised. She has a fantastic management company, but they can't control. And also, Emma has star quality as well. That's another factor. There's other players, such as Sophia Kenin, who won the Australian Open a little unexpectedly at 20. Wonderful player, doesn't have the same sort of impact globally as Emma does. She's just a superstar. She's got that special something. And, from what I did, Emma's, is 100 times what I did, but I can relate to being at that age and it all being rather difficult. But for her, I didn't have to do it really in the spotlight. She's having to do everything in the spotlight. I felt very sad actually when she said in Indian Wells, at 20, she's sort of hiding under a rock. 20, you want to be having fun. She's talented, she's brilliantly clever, she's beautiful. She should be having the time of her life. And she doesn't look very happy. I don't know what to advise. I'm not in that position, but I just would like her as a human being just to seem a little happier, because she has so much. And she will come right. I'm sure she will. She might need to take a break. That may be an option, and take a little bit more control of her life. But it's really, I'm not in a position to advise, because it's so out of the realms of anything that I could possibly. I don't think anyone can understand right now what it's like to be Emma Raducanu.
Flipping it slightly to someone who's probably given you quite a lot of advice over the years, Sue Barker won't be at Wimbledon this summer. It'll be a massive moment. And I think a lot of people will be quite emotional about that, really. Talk to us about Sue, because obviously the public and the sporting watching world know her as a wonderful, thriving, funny, just sort of Auntie Sue, sort of face of British sport in the summer, and unquestioned sport as well. Talk to us about the Sue off the camera. What is she like, and the work she does to be able to become and be so natural in front of camera?
Sue's exactly the same off camera as she is on. And you tend to find the best presenters and broadcasters are like that. And I can remember being at Wimbledon in the early days, and Sue would be up in there was a canteen in the broadcast centre, and she'd be up there with the floor manager and the camera guys, having a bacon butty before going on camera. That's Sue. Okay, so completely down to earth. She never ever leaves that studio, ever. She goes within about 10 meters to the makeup room, but she apart from a quick breakfast in the morning, she's there. She's working extremely hard. I think the more natural a broadcaster is, the harder they've worked, and she has her own little system. And although she may look incredibly relaxed, there's been times I've sat there as a guest, you can tell she's a little nervous. And she said how nervous she was the first time she went on the centre court, when they told her that she'd have to go on the centre court to do the interviews, because you won't remember, but that didn't happen until a few years ago. So she's so natural and so brilliant that you think it's just she does it off the cuff, but it's all very careful preparation. She's incredibly encouraging to other broadcasters. She's let me sit in the studio with an earpiece in to hear all the traffic in her ear, what she's hearing. It's unbelievable how much noise and how many voices there are, yet she filters it all out. And but she doesn't always know a few seconds before coming on camera where she's going or what the plan is, so she always covers it, and it will be a really big deal this year. I mean, she has not put a foot wrong in 30 years, and all the things that she's had to deal with. So she's absolutely extraordinary and very encouraging, actually. I didn't get to say cheerio to her because I went down with corona the second week of Wimbledon. But I actually watched it on TV. And I know a lot of the other broadcasters it was a big moment, and it will be so strange this year without her. But she sent me a really great text a few days later and said, Sam, I wish I was your age, which meaning, you still got a lot to do. And, keep going, keep being ambitious, keep doing all the things that you want to do. And that's a very typical, Sue thing to do. In fact, she said, we thought you'd been run over or something, because she said, Sam, I've never known you to miss a day, like ever, a minute, ever. You're always there. So, and then when I wasn't there for a couple of days, most people didn't know what had happened. So she thought I'd been run over, because I'll always be there. I mean, even though I've not been very well. So that's Sue. And there's very few broadcasters, presenters who could fill those shoes. And one of the very few presenters that can cope with the amount of complications from what is going on in there is Claire Balding. Yeah. And Claire will be brilliant at it. She really will. She's going to take it in another direction. But I can't tell you how much there is going on behind the scenes. And only an exceptional broadcaster could handle that.
In terms of another direction, obviously you know Claire very well. You've worked with her lots, and she's done lots. Everyone knows Claire, and we know she'll be brilliant. In terms of a different direction, do you have any kind of idea? I mean, how these people who front the coverage, how much sort of editorials, sort of say do they have in the style of the output? I
think it depends the network you're working for. Obviously, so I don't know how much say Sue had in production meetings. I really don't. I know that Claire is always very involved in running orders. She's absolutely meticulous. And Claire, sometimes I've been sitting in the studio with Claire, actually once down at Eastbourne, and as her guest, and Claire will be going through the top of the show, and she'll be looking at all the clips, and she'll look at them very carefully, and she'll just say, "Oh, can you just shave like 1.5 seconds off that piece of VT because it runs better." She is meticulous at going through it.
Wow.
And so but Claire loves tennis, which is great. I've played tennis with her. It's interesting. Tried to coach her. Interesting. She wanted to know everything. Like, she wanted me to fix her backhand, serve, volley, in half an hour.
Wow.
That's very Claire. But the great thing with Claire is that she started off on the radio.
Yeah.
Over 25 years ago. And so got very used to the language of the sport, how Wimbledon functions, the grass court season, went through all the levels of starting off I can remember first couple of years that I retired sitting with Claire on court 14 for Radio 5 Live, where they come to you 3 times a day. That's it. And you suddenly have to sort of wake up and give a summary.
Yeah.
And I knew she'd be brilliant. I knew that she would go on to do great things. So she started right at the bottom. People forget that. And she has just worked her way through and earned everything that, she's really earned this position. Then she went on to present, obviously, the coverage for Radio 5 Live. And then for many years, she does the highlights, and then splitting the session with Sue. Because before, tennis used to start about 1:00 and finish about 7 or 8. And then you have the highlight show. Now we start at 11, which means you need to go on air about 10, and you can still be there with the roof and the lights. You can still be there at 11 o'clock at night. You need 2 presenters. That's why, in the end, Sue said, "I can't do 13 hours on air. It's ridiculous." So that's how we ended up sort of splitting it. But I haven't really answered your question, but I think where Claire will take it. So she's got great knowledge. She understands how it works. She knows everybody, which is really important. Already got a very good rapport with Martina and Chris Evert. Knows a lot of the players, watches the sport. But what she will do, she's not going to sit there like Sue with John McEnroe and analyse Federer's forehand or analyse a match on that level. Sue's a Grand Slam champion, brilliant tennis player. Claire, I think maybe will be very aware of relating to the person that doesn't play tennis, and I think maybe there will maybe more social media, it may be more current, but she will find a way. It will change. It will change slightly because she's not an ex-player, and that will be different. But she will add new layers to the coverage. And she will obviously use her experts very well, but in a different way to Sue. That's what I'm seeing.
Fantastic! It's exciting, isn't it? Sam, just to wrap it up, you've worked with so many brilliant broadcasters. You yourself have become a very fine one as well.
Oh, thank you. It's a work in progress. It really is.
As Sue said, you got time to do whatever. But what biggest piece of advice that you've been given would you share with people listening who look at Wimbledon on TV and be like, I want to do that?
Gosh. Well, I'm a great believer. There's two things I would say. I'm a great believer that most things in life come back to one sentence. How much do you want it? And even if there doesn't seem to be any doors open, you have to find one. It's obviously easier as an ex-athlete, but I've fought my battles because there are very few female lead broadcasters, and that was a very big battle and I still fight it sometimes actually. But I really wanted it. I want to be the best that's my goal, to be the best broadcaster at the end of my career that I could have been. That's it. It's not relative to anyone else. It's how good can I be. The other piece of advice I would give to all broadcasters is I'll go back to Nick Mullins, who is one of my favourite commentators, and he's been a great mentor to me. And we used to sit on Court 18 an awful lot for Radio 5 Live, giggling and messing about, and then they'd suddenly come to us. And I asked him, I said, I'm really keen on this broadcasting lark. I want to take it forward. And he just said, Sam, be yourself. Just be yourself. So I always that would be my two things. How much do you want it? And then if you do get there, be yourself.
Sam Smith, episode 3. I Know That Voice. Thanks very much for listening. Please, if you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow, give us a rating. We want to hear what you like, who you want to hear, what you don't like. It's all very welcome. And also give us a follow on Instagram for the bonus content. We're at I Know That Voice Pod.